Hello, my name is Sean Gladden. I'm the Executive Director at the Howard County Historical Society. I wanted to thank you for joining us for a quick history of Howard County. If you like what you hear today, please consider joining the Howard County Historical Society as a member. I will start off by saying that Howard County, or Upper Anne Arundel County's founding, is very similar to many other Chesapeake region communities in that it was founded by religious dissidents, immigrants, adventurers, and speculators who capitalized on the 18th century demand for slave produced tobacco. Many names that surround us today, in the form of street names, village centers, and schools, bear the name of the early plantations and land grants of that period of settlement between 1650 and 1750. The Warfields, the Carrolls, the Hammonds, the Browns, the Ridgeleys, the Gaithers, the Dorseys, and the Shipleys, to name a few, were the first families to cross the Severn River into Upper Arundel region, which had previously been hunting grounds for various Susquehannock tribes. This historical marker, located off of Route 103 near Ellicott City, is Shipley's Choice, the first land grant in the Upper Arundel region. By the middle 1700s, Upper Anne Arundel County had numerous plantations spread out from Elk Ridge, which was the main commercial port and community for the region. To the west and along both sides of the Patapsco and Patuxent rivers are where the boundaries were laid. With tobacco being the primary cash crop, labor was essential. So slaves and indentured servants populated each and every plantation. Early records of slaveholding here prior to 1700 are not reliable. So when these planters started using African slaves is uncertain. But we do know that Maryland planters started using slaves in 1642. So it is safe to assume that there was indeed a black population here very soon after settlement. We do know that the headright system was in place, which basically guaranteed that any settler would get 50 acres of land for every slave or servant that they employed to work on that land. You can see right here in the center of Howard County is Doregan Manor, which at its largest was 10,000 acres for the Carrolls right here in the center of Howard County. Grantees during the 1600s and early 1700s would acquire anywhere from 200 acres to 7,000 acres of land, with one of the largest tracts of land being granted to the wealthy Catholic family, the Carrolls. In addition to African slaves, many plantations employed indentured servants, whose contract was good for a specified term of years, with the promise of land at the end of the contract. These arrangements for white laborers would create a growing number of independent farming families that would form the next generation of Howard County names that we are all familiar with. There were various opportunities in the area for small farmers and former indentured servants when their contracts had been completed. Clarksville was originally in the southeastern section of Charles Carroll's Doregan property. In 1797, Charles Carroll hired three brothers from Scotland through his agents in Ireland to work that section of his land. The Clark brothers fulfilled a 30-year indenture with the Carrolls, working the land and established themselves as independent small farmers by the dawn of the Civil War. In Arundel County, both upper and lower sections were hardened patriots during the Revolution. Many of the founding families committed politicians and soldiers to the war effort. While names like Gassaway Watkins may be lost on many of us living in Howard County today, these were the revolutionary heroes from the late 1700s who served with Washington and fought in elite units like the Maryland 400. Meanwhile, Charles Carroll of Carrollton was representing Maryland at the Continental Congress as the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence. Carroll would often entertain truly historic names like Washington, Jefferson, and Lafayette at his manor house on the Doregan plantation. There are quite a few stories regarding Washington and Lafayette stopping at a well-known Spurrier's Tavern along Route 175 and Route 1 on the road to Elkridge. In addition to politicians and soldiers, industrious businessmen also found success in the war. The Dorsey Forge in Elk Ridge, an early pre-industrial and tobacco town, was working overtime producing iron for the war effort and making the Dorsey family one of the wealthiest in Anne Arundel County. After the Revolution, the county was diversifying its economy along with the rest of the state and moving away from tobacco as a chief export and cash crop. With the arrival of the Ellicott brothers in 1772, a change in the economic climate was on the horizon. The Quaker Ellicott family had a profound impact on the Patapsco Valley region. They not only were able to convince Charles Carroll to switch from tobacco cultivation to wheat, grain, and barley so that they could produce flour in their newly developed mill town, as Quakers, they also brought an emphasis on education and established some of the first schools in the county. Ellicott Mills would be a boon for the local economy, as many planters followed suit with the Carrolls and opportunities emerged for small farmers like the Clarks, creating a farming community by the middle 1800s. With the creation of Ellicott Mills as an early factory town, opportunities also emerged for mill workers who would work and live in stone buildings built for them in town, many of which are still intact today. Due to the lucrative nature of the flour and iron trades coming out of this part of Anne Arundel County, our argument is that Ellicott Mills became the center of an industrial revolution, highlighted by the first railroad station in America. This success eventually led to the breaking away from Anne Arundel County and the creation of Howard County in 1851. Howard County was named after John Eager Howard, a Revolutionary War hero, and some of his family did indeed live here in Howard County, with some of them actually his brother George living at the Waverly Plantation. Despite the switch to wheat, many of the larger plantations continued to rely on slave labor, leaving the county divided between large, wealthy slaveholders and independent family farmers. While overwhelmingly pro-slavery in its politics, there was a strong pro-union sentiment in the industrial towns of Elkridge and Ellicott Mills, as well as some anti-slavery sentiment in the free black communities near Freetown, Jonestown, and Cooksville. Resistance and opposition to slavery increased as we moved closer to the Civil War. There are numerous stories of Underground Railroad activity along present-day Route 32 near Freetown. Also, there was activity at Simpsonville and Guilford, and also some activity along Route 1. Much like Frederick Douglass, who had escaped from Baltimore in 1838, Oliver Cromwell Gilbert was a slave here at Walnut Grove Plantation in Clarksville. He escaped in 1848 and eventually became an abolitionist in Philadelphia and New Hampshire. Despite the runaways and anti-slavery sentiment, Howard County remained a slave-owning county until 1864. By 1850, Howard County had 12,006 residents. 2,759 of them were enslaved. That's 23% of Howard County's population in 1850. The American Civil War fractured Howard County politically as 427 men would enlist in the Union Army, with 377 joining the Confederacy, including a unit of men trained by General George Gaither at Oakland Plantation Manor, currently off of Vantage Point across from the Columbia Mall. George Gaither's troops defected south very shortly after the Civil War, once again showing the bitter divide amongst the landowners here in Howard County. Despite there not being any actual engagements taking place in the county, the railroad lines at Elkridge and Ellicott Mills were important strategic positions that had to be defended from Confederate attack. The closest military engagement that occurred happened in 1864 after General Lew Wallace's retreat from Monocacy through Cooksville. One of the many undertold stories from Howard County is the role that the United States colored troops from our county played in the war. Numerous men of color either ran away or were freed to go and fight for the Union cause. There were at least 80 former slaves from Howard County who were freed to enlist and serve in the Union in USCT regiments. One that we as a county should embrace and celebrate is Decatur Dorsey, a freed slave who won the Medal of Honor for bravery as a flag bearer at the Battle of Petersburg. Despite being a slaveholding county with significant members of the community leaning towards the Southern cause, very little reconstruction occurred here after the war. The returning veterans from the Confederacy found themselves in county commissioners' roles, judgeships, and in law enforcement and military service, and ultimately in politics. The county had come to be dominated by big business-oriented Democrats like Edwin Warfield, Arthur Pugh Gorman, and Daniel Carroll, each holding prominent state political positions. Howard County settled into a thoroughly segregated county with pockets of Black communities emerging in places like Guilford, Simpsonville, Cooksville, Jonestown, and the Fells Lane section of Ellicott City. While African Americans were registered to vote in Howard County, there was very little in the way of biracial politics. Howard County looked like any other former slave community readjusting to life after the war. The features of a segregated community were throughout the county, with colored schools, Black churches, and segregated public spaces. Many former slaves who did not move to Black communities would find work sharecropping on the very same farms that they had previously been enslaved on, like George Sparrow here in the lower right-hand corner of our PowerPoint slide. Howard County also had 2 lynchings in Ellicott City, the most notorious being the lynching of Jacob Henson in 1895, who was drugged from his jail cell after killing his boss in an argument and was executed by a mob on a hillside up on the other side of Patapsco Female Institute. The years after the war would be economically prosperous for the county, and improved technology, transportation, and communication led to more farmers and businesses flourishing in the county. In addition to a commercial center, Ellicott City would become the county seat in the 1840s, along with a newly constructed jail and courthouse. Farm goods could be sold to merchants in Baltimore or to buyers out west towards Frederick and beyond. Manufactured goods were being produced in the main commercial towns of Ellicott City and Elk Ridge, while small towns benefited from travelers east and west along the National Road. The economy was steady throughout the late 1800s. By 1899, Howard County contained 400 miles of dirt and 48 miles of stone roads, including 3 paid turnpikes maintained by 118 men. Most traffic through the county consisted of loads being delivered to railroad crossings. Ellicott Mills would be chartered as Ellicott City in 1867, and the very next year get devastated in the worst flood to hit the region, the flood of 1868. Flooding would continue to plague the former colonial mill town throughout its history, with 30 significant floods in 250 years. 23 Patapsco floods, and 7 top-down flash floods, much like what hit the town in 2016 and 2018. Howard Countyans have fought in every major war, United States war going back to the Revolution. World War I saw a huge increase in enlistments and conscriptions over prior wars. 551 Howard Countyans served in the Great War. Harry Selby was from Marriottsville and served on the front lines during the Meuse-Argonne campaign. Mr. Selby exhibited bravery in his leadership of an assault on a machine gun position and lost his life as a result. The French honored Mr. Selby with the Croix de Guerre for gallantry. That medal is on exhibit at the Museum of Howard County History in Ellicott City. From the history repeats itself category, in 1918, a deadly flu pandemic swept the country and certainly swept the county. Historians say that this flu epidemic began at Camp Meade in adjacent Anne Arundel County. The pandemic hit the county in 3 waves, with everything in Howard County, schools, churches, stores, transportation, theaters, all closed during the second wave. The final death tally in the United States from the 1918 to 1919 pandemic numbered over 675,000 dead. The population at the time was around 104 million, so roughly a third of what our population is today. By October 12th, according to the Baltimore Sun, there were approximately 11,000 cases with 525 deaths at Camp Meade alone. The years between the wars saw Howard County struggling with the same issues as the rest of the country. Prohibition actually started in Ellicott City early with a city ordinance in 1910, supported by many in the community, including Judge James Clark Sr. That ordinance banned the sale of alcohol except for medicinal purposes. Seemingly overnight, saloons on Main Street were replaced with pharmacies, serving alcohol as long as you had a prescription from a doctor. The rest of the county was adjusting to the improved transportation. The 1930s saw a shift from one-room schoolhouses to centralized schools with bus service. The 1930s also saw a decrease in county-wide farm production as more business opportunities emerged in nearby manufacturing hubs like Baltimore on the eve of World War II. Despite improved transportation and the move towards a public school system, Howard County would remain a segregated community with a segregated transportation and school system. Over 1,900 Howard Countyans served in the Second World War. Men like Ambrose Cross, who would serve as a truck driver in General Patton's famed Red Ball Express, which was a truck supply. Jim Clark Jr. would serve in the 442nd Troop Carrier Group 303rd Squadron using Piper TG-8 gliders in 1944. He called his glider the Ellicott City Express. He participated in two notable campaigns, Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands in 1944 and Operation Varsity, a U.S. airborne mission into Germany in 1945. After the war, like many other Howard Countyans who served, these men would return home and serve their county. Ambrose Cross worked for the post office on Main Street and then would be a bailiff at the circuit courthouse until he retired in the 1990s. Jim Clark Jr. would go on to have an illustrious career in politics as president of the Maryland Senate from 1979 to 1983. During the war, many German POWs who were detained at Fort Meade would work on Howard County farms as prison labor. This is a picture from the Howard County Historical Society collection of German POWs outside of a building on a Howard County farm. The years after the wars were a time of sustained economic prosperity, improved transportation, and sharp population increases as Howard County started suburbanizing. As one can see, beginning in the 1950s, double-digit increases percentage-wise for population all the way up until today. In 1940, local newspaper owner led a 5-county commission to study a superhighway between Baltimore and Washington through Howard County. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 eventually led to the construction of Interstate 70 across northern Howard County and Interstate 95 across the eastern part of the county as well. The sparsely populated county now hosted population centers in Ellicott City, Elk Ridge, Savage, North Laurel, and Lisbon. Despite the ruling in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 that called for the desegregation of public schools in America at all due speed, the schools in Howard County would remain segregated until 1965. The Harriet Tubman High School near Atholton was the last segregated school in Howard County. Currently, it is being renovated into a cultural and historical center that will be open in 2021. The county was predominantly agricultural in character until 1966, when construction began on the new town of Columbia. Columbia was planned and developed by the Rouse Company, led by its founder, James Rouse. Beginning with an idea and the purchase of more than 14,000 acres in the mid-1960s, it has reached the original population projection and in almost every way has met the goals put forth in its original proposal and advertising. The county's population has grown approximately 500% since then and is now one of the wealthiest in the nation. Under a home rule charter since 1968, Howard County is governed by an elected county executive and a 5-member county council. The inclusion of Columbia as a new town has certainly changed the demographic nature of the county. We have become more diverse. We have become more connected to the Baltimore and Washington markets and continue to grow in the future. That is a quick 15-minute history of Howard County history. Thank you very much on behalf of the Howard County Historical Society. If you'd like to know more information about Howard County history, visit www.hchsmd.org or visit our museum in Old Ellicott City, the Museum of Howard County History. Thank you.